Hello and good afternoon and welcome to LVS Perspectives number 38, Equity and Inclusion in the World Today. And we're really honoured to have Asif Sadiq with us today. Asif's been in school all morning speaking to children from year 6 to year 13.
Yeah.
And our governors. Yeah, so I'm going to pass straight over to Asif so he can tell you what he's been telling us today. And if you've got any questions, please post them on the chat as normal and we can answer them at various intervals. So.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Just to give everyone a quick introduction about myself. So my name is Asif Sadiq. I currently head up Equity and Inclusion at Warner Media International. You might not recognize Warner Media, but you'll probably recognize some of our brands from CNN, Warner Brothers, HBO Max, and some of our TV stations as well. I've been at Warner Media for almost a year, looking after D&I both internally and externally. Prior to that, I headed up diversity and inclusion for Adidas and Reebok globally, and I've headed up diversity for Ernst & Young, the Telegraph Media Group, and the Police Service. So I wanted to spend some time today just talking about this topic because many of you would have heard elements over the last couple of years around diversity, inclusion. Many organizations are talking about it. Many young people, as I saw today through engaging with many of the young people today, it was a hugely important subject for them. They had great understanding. Some of them had much better understanding than even I did on certain subjects. But it's really highlighted that this is a really important area. But I do think it's important for us to just break it down to truly understand what it means. And I wanted to share some of my perspectives on what that means, and also why I think it's important for organizations, schools, educational establishments going forward. So the first thing is this whole concept of diversity. Diversity isn't a singular dimension. And this topic comes up very often because many organizations, focus on, gender equity, racial equity, disability inclusion, LGBTQ+, and so on. The truth is, no one person is one element of diversity. We are made up of multiple layers of who we are. And at different points in our life, different things become more important, less important. I always give a personal example. Many people talk to me about race. And race, of course, was a challenge for me in my younger years when I found difficulty with the police and so on, being stopped. But race today is not so much of a challenge. I've got 2 young kids, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. As many of you will know, that's one of the biggest diversity challenges I face, especially trying to be a present father, one who's there but still trying to manage a busy career. But no one talks to me about that because it's not visible. I'm neurodiverse, which some of the kids were fascinated by, that I'm dyslexic, and they were just sharing that they're dyslexic as well. But again, people don't see that because it's not visible. As I'm getting older, unfortunately, there's elements of disability that are starting to kick in. And again, that's the reality of life. But what it shows is that diversity will change over time. At different points in our life, different bits are important. And also, I guess the other big thing is acknowledging that diversity also covers other areas like socioeconomic background, age diversity, neurodiversity, cultural diversity. All these things are just as important as other elements. And the final thing, which is one which I hear more and more of, and I hear many organizations and companies talking about, is that somehow diversity will disadvantage someone, or it will program, people to think a certain way, and we're trying to change the freedom of thinking and having different opinions. The truth is, diversity is about every single person. It doesn't limit anyone. Diversity is not a diverse team, a diverse school, a diverse board. It's not one that has 10 people who look like me. It's one that has a mix of the rich diversity of the world around us. That's true diversity. And it's never been about taking away from one group and giving to another, but it's about enriching everyone's experiences and creating environments where every single person can truly be their authentic self. So diversity is truly about each and every individual. Interestingly, I've been talking a lot today about how do we go then to the next stage, right? If we've got diversity, what's next? And many people talk about inclusion, that we need to create inclusive environments where people are included. And I've been talking about a concept that there's a lot of research out there on, a lot of eminent organizations like EY, PwC, universities have done research on, which is belonging. And what I talk about is that inclusion is great, and it's, a journey on that journey from diversity to inclusion, but we need to get to belonging. And why is that? Because just including someone who's diverse or from an underrepresented group does not necessarily mean we've got that sense of belonging. What is belonging? Belonging is when someone has psychological safety, when someone can be their authentic self, when someone can speak up and give a different opinion without repercussions or without any consequences. And that's crucially important for workplaces of the future, but actually for educational establishments as well, because we want to enrich young people's experiences of learning, make sure that they see different views, they see the world in the multiple views that are out there. So belonging is where we want people to get to, where they belong, where they can be that true, authentic self, and share their personal sort of knowledge and experience. Statistically, people who have a sense of belonging are 3.5 times more productive. Innovation goes up, creativity, problem solving. So all the great things we aspire to achieve, or we want future generations, workplaces to achieve, is achieved through that sense of belonging. Now, all that's great, right? Like getting to the belonging. But you could still be arguing that why is diversity and inclusion important? And I think there's a few things that really sort of bring it to light. First is there's a legal implication, especially in the UK. We've got the Equality Act 2010 that has 9 protected characteristics, and there is a duty upon organizations to really tackle discrimination, create better relationships between people of different groups, and creates equal opportunity for different groups. So you've got the legal implications, which are very similar to many countries around the world. You've got the moral case, which I hope everyone gets, especially after the last couple of years, where it's clearly been identified that diversity is not an option. Future generations, they view diversity in a very different way. For them, it's crucial. It's one of the things that morally, if an organization, an establishment doesn't have, they won't align to that organization or establishment. But the most emerging theme is the business case. And when I say business case, it's not just from a financial gain perspective, but a better performance perspective as well. Organizations that have truly embedded diversity and inclusion are more profitable, have better engagement with their consumers, their customers, their students, and so on. And organizations who get it wrong can have huge consequences from a reputational risk perspective, but also when you think about financially, it can have a huge impact. There's organizations in the last couple of years who have made mistakes, and it's had an impact on their share price. It's had an impact on their profitability. So it is really and truly a hugely important thing from a business perspective, especially as businesses think of the future, as businesses consider how they're going to compete as we go back to whatever the new norm is going to be, or whether it's hybrid working, as many of you will probably know. But diversity will be crucial to how we achieve success as organizations. But more so, when a lot of the amazing students I've met today, when they graduate and they go into the workplace of the future, that workplace will not be the workplace we're in today. There'll be technology advancements, which is huge, but with technology, it's also important to understand that diversity is just as important. How diversity is built into that technology. How do we create products that are truly inclusive of different groups, products that reach out to everyone, and products that are not biased? And you could be wondering, is that true? Can we get products that are biased? Can we get technology that's biased? Very much so. Algorithms are made by humans, and humans always have that element of error. The greatest technology is only as good as the people who design it. And unless you have diversity of thinking, diversity of perspectives built into the design stage, you will end up with products that are biased. Recent report in the US highlighted that driverless cars, if you're of darker skin, you're 20 times less likely to be picked up. That's worrying that in today, or this time and age, that we still get it wrong. But it's not intentional, and I'm a firm believer that no one's intentionally done that. But someone didn't think about it. Someone didn't build that diversity into that product or the product design. So diversity will be really important for future generations. It's not going to go away. Many people talk about that, other things have been important in the past. They've dropped. We had Me Too, which drove gender equity. We've had the murder of George Floyd, BLM, global racial awakening, and that's driven a lot of diversity, which it has. Unfortunately, we will see dips, which is what unfortunately has happened in the past. But I say that the most crucial and important thing is, how can we continue to be proactive? We don't want to be reactive. We want to make sure, even as organizations, that we create and we continue to drive that agenda. One of the amazing things that we're doing at Warner Media, where I am currently, is building diversity into our programs, into our shows. For any of you who watch anything that we put together, you will see that there's a very different take on our output, because we want to make sure we don't stereotype, we don't assume what communities are. We break down some of the negative perceptions of countries, groups of people, because we all know that's not true. So we do have the power to build that and to build that change. But similarly, and one of the things I've been saying to the students today is they have the power to build this in their every single day, in their everyday lives, but every single day they have the power to build that change. And the truth is, it's not necessarily the big things or the multi-million pound, dollar, euro investments that we put into this space. It's the small steps that each and every person can take to drive change, to build those inclusive environments. Inclusion starts from having discussions. I learn, as I said, I've got young kids. I had my son challenge me the other day. He's 6, and he challenged me because he was asking about going to one of his friends' houses. And I said to him, yeah, of course, I'll speak to his mummy and daddy, and I'll let you know. And he turned around and said to me, Daddy, you could have 2 mummies or 2 daddies. And I was like, wow. So my 6-year-old is breaking my bias, some of the stereotypes that have been built over time. But it was amazing that I could learn from someone as young as that the importance of diversity and how he sees the world so differently. And I think these things are really, really important. I also see it from even other elements of diversity around characteristics. Gender equity is such a big topic. It's so sad to hear, even with International Women's Day coming up, that we will achieve gender parity in 2050 something. I mean, that's worrying. But we do need to make sure that every single person champions it. Every single person understands why it's important. But how do we break down norms that have been built over the years? And this is where, again, every single person can do their bit, their part. Male characteristics. I'm again just as guilty. My son does taekwondo, my daughter does ballet. I've just made a conscious effort now to make sure my daughter does taekwondo as well. And I've asked my son if he wants to do ballet, because I can break some of those things. I tell my kids it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to cry. Whether you're a boy or a girl, it doesn't make a difference. And it's these small things that we can incorporate in our everyday lives that truly drive change. And in the workplace, it's exactly the same. How do we explore difference? How do we have conversations with people who are different to us without forming assumptions? One of the biggest challenges we have in society and in the workplace is 3-4 things, which I'll very, very quickly touch upon. Is the first one being microaggressions. Microaggressions are everyday behaviors, subtle behaviors that can have an impact on individuals, usually with the best of intent. I don't think anyone goes in with a microaggression hoping to offend someone or get it wrong, but they do exist. And I gave an example earlier. One of the ones I hear a lot is, your English is really good. And it always surprises me, because why would my English not be? 4th generation English speaking, I'd be shocked if it wasn't good. But it is that kind of thing. And I don't think people ask me in a negative way or say it in a negative way. But I do believe that we do have a responsibility to educate. So I don't get angry. What I tend to do is ask the question back. So I usually say, thank you. Why do you think my English is good? And it opens up good discussion, debate, and learning. Similar with biases. We all have biases. But how do we ensure that as we have conversations, as we make decisions, we don't let our biases come into play? We don't let our, what we perceive or what we think be the determining factor. How do we be consciously inclusive? And that's a term, by the way, that I use a lot, because I don't believe in unconscious bias by itself. I think if we can all be a bit more consciously inclusive, and again, this is what I was telling the students today, that as you go about your day-to-day life, day-to-day learning, how can you just be a bit more consciously inclusive of who's missing, who hasn't spoken up, which one of your classmates, teammates hasn't had an opportunity to say something? and maybe give them that opportunity, or maybe speak to them. Someone who's sitting by themselves in the canteen, or someone you don't sit next to normally, go sit next to them, ask them, explore difference. We can always learn if we create those learning environments. And learning doesn't have to be difficult either. There is a fear, and I'll say that because in every organization, including the ones I've worked for, there is a fear of getting it wrong, saying the wrong thing, offending someone, getting cancelled, and all those sort of terms that many people talk about. The most important thing is that we create psychological safety. Psychological safety so that we can have those difficult conversations. Psychological safety so that we can learn. We can get it wrong and we can still learn. And by the way, making mistakes is fine. All of us make mistakes. Even me with the 20 odd years of experience, again, I was mentioning earlier, I was speaking at a conference last month and I wanted to say working hours and I said man hours. Now, of course, I know it's wrong, but it was unfortunately that unconscious bias. I was under time pressure. I had to make a decision quickly on the words I was using and I said man hours. But I stopped and I said, do you know what? I apologize. That's probably not a term I should have used, and it's only because it's a term that I grew up hearing that it's come out, and this is why it's wrong. And there was about 100 people on the call, and we spent about 10 minutes discussing why it's wrong, what we can do. But it was amazing because we used it as an opportunity to learn. So no one cancelled me, but we used it as an opportunity to learn, and that was great because some people didn't know why is it such a wrong term. When they understood why it's wrong and why we shouldn't use it, it was amazing. But we can all do our piece, and the psychological safety for others, but also for yourself, is so important. Because many a times we forget that even leaders need psychological safety, even teachers, everyone needs psychological safety. So we can create that if we create learning environments. Education is a great place because it is about learning, but we need to replicate that actually into businesses. That how do we learn? How do we debate things? How do we listen to everyone in the room? How do we take different ideas? And of course, we might still have to go down a path that's not to everyone's views, but how can we appreciate that? Because we've discussed, we've learned, and we've explored difference. So diversity and inclusion is an important factor. It's an important thing to do, and it's not just the final term as well. It's not about equality, because I hear a lot about equality, and equality is right, but it's also about equity. How do we understand what are the different things we can put in place to give everyone the same positive experiences? It's not about advantage. I hear a lot, especially in the private sector, that because of diversity and inclusion, someone's going to get an advantage. Someone's going to get something that someone else is not getting. Completely false. What we're trying to do is get everyone to the same start line. That's it. At the end of the day, everyone's going to run that race for themselves, and we're going to employ the best people, regardless of their background. But we know that there is not equity within society, within processes, and we must address that equity in order to make sure everyone has the same opportunities. And that's really important. Like privilege. Privilege, I hear a lot of conversations around privilege, and that privilege is a bad thing, or it's a good thing, and all that kind of stuff. Privilege exists. It's existed for hundreds of years. The key thing is to acknowledge your privilege. I'm very privileged in my own life, and I acknowledge it. But I try to do more to support those who don't have the same privileges. And again, there's others who have privileges that I don't have, and they do more to make sure people like me are included in that conversation as well. And all of us can do that. But hopefully, that gives you some insights into some of the conversations I've had. I mean, we've had some very deep conversations with the students, and I've again, it's for me, it's always really interesting when I speak to young people, because their minds are so open to learning and understanding different perspectives, and they're so welcoming to change. Even the youngest of students had such positive views on different elements, and I think that's so positive. But it is something that they're growing up with. This is something that's going to be expected, they will expect from the workplace, from their families, from society. So we do have a duty to build that into what we do, to ensure that we do create a better working environment, a better world, because the world would be quite boring if we all had to think the same and behave the same. But we can do a lot more. And my final ask of you is really the piece around, and I say this a lot even in my organization, that diversity and inclusion is not just for the workplace or for the school. We can all do more to enrich our experiences outside of our environments. I'm just as guilty. I go to the same restaurants, I go sit in the same seat in the same corner, but I've recently really been making a conscious effort to try new things, to go to different places that I haven't gone, to attend cultural events that I wouldn't otherwise attend. Do you know why? Because it enriches me. It breaks that, that the thinking I have, it breaks some of my biases if I can experience different experiences. But yeah, hopefully that gives you some insights on some of the conversations and just some thoughts to take.
That's brilliant. And if you have any questions, please put them through on the feed. Just a couple of things from this morning and some of our conversations as well. And going on to privilege, obviously we're in an independent school and therefore we are quite privileged. And we've had conversations with the parents before about how we are perceived to the outside world. You gave a really good example this morning to our governors about privilege and what you did. Are you happy to share that example?
Sure, yeah, definitely. So, and interestingly, my kids are in an independent school as well, and it's always like quite interesting for me because when I speak to my colleagues as well, I'm not sure whether to say it or not to say it, and because it comes with certain perceived ideas. But the example I gave of privilege was my next door neighbour wanted some work experience for her son. And as you probably know, Warner Brothers has studios and all across, all across the world, but actually in London as well. And I emailed the studio and said, can I get work experience for my neighbour's son? And because of my title, what I do, I assumed they said, of course, no problem, because that's the response I got. And then I acknowledged that was my privilege in action, and I'm aware of it. But what I asked them was, could we do some additional work experiences? And they were like, yeah, sure. I'm like, could you do about 4? They're like, yeah. So I'm like, why don't you do this? You can have my neighbour's son coming in, but open up the other 3 to young people from the surrounding boroughs, from the local area. Because not only is that great, and it's using my privilege for good, but it also enriches my neighbour's son's experiences as well, and everyone else's. And they did it. So it was me, of course, using my privilege, but then using my privilege for good to create opportunities for those who might not have the same privileges.
And that's wonderful. And I know the Independent Schools Council also, they have the Schools Together website where especially independent schools can actually contribute through that. So if you can't contribute with money and things like that, we've got the expertise amongst our body here, our community. Like we have a working party for people, to share career opportunities, but we could probably reach out to our community a bit more.
Definitely.
And you were talking about Harry Potter with the little ones as well. What were you doing?
Yeah, so it was fascinating. We were talking about Harry Potter and how diverse Harry Potter is, and I was telling them a bit about the makeup of the different sort of groups within Harry Potter and so on. And one of the things I asked them was that if every single group within Harry Potter, so the different God, I can't even remember the word now, but the clubs that they have within Harry Potter, if they were all the same, would you watch it? And they were like, no. So because all of them had a different club that they sort of associated within Harry Potter. And that, I was like, that's the beauty of diversity, that you have all those differences, but yet you can still enjoy the same thing together and enrich, that sort of experience. So it was fascinating just seeing that. But also I was telling them about how we're building inclusion into some of the games that we're making. So the Harry Potter game and so on, where it's all about how do we create more inclusion, what does it look like, but it's fascinating.
And with the older year groups, the year 11, 12 and 13, they were in together. Did any of them ask any particular questions, or were there any themes coming through on that one?
Yeah, so it was really interesting. I mean, some of them did ask questions, but what really touched me was, so I'd during the break, I was walking around outside, and 3 of the students came up to me. So I had mentioned to them that I'm neurodiverse. I didn't tell them which element of neurodiversity I have, but I did say that I find it difficult to spell, which I do, and to read and to write occasionally as well. And 2 young kids came to me when I was outside and said, "Are you dyslexic?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am." I'm like, "How did you guess?" They're like, "Well, because when you were speaking, we're dyslexic," and that resonated with us. And they said they really appreciated the fact, because what I said to them is, my dyslexia is not a weakness, it's a superpower, because it allows me to do other things like really, really well. And I know I can't spell everything properly and necessarily read everything the best, but I can do things that others can't do. And I said that to them, and it was, for me, it was just amazing to see them. They're like, wow, yeah, that really, it made such a huge difference to be able to see that, you are dyslexic and you can still, be working in a big company and you're very confident saying it. And for me, it was amazing that they could just figure out what it was without me even telling them, because I didn't say dyslexia, but they could pick up on the things that I said are my weaknesses.
Oh, that's brilliant. I'm really glad that they came up to you. Well done for that. And you mentioned also when you were talking to the governors about neurodiversity in the workplace as well and different sectors. So
yeah, sure. So I mean, actually, that probably brings me back to this point around it being a superpower. Neurodiversity, so people who are dyslexic, dyspraxic, autistic, many big companies, and some of you might even work for these companies, but Microsoft, SAP, Ernst & Young, they're now creating centers of neurodiversity. And the reason is, what they've found out, which of course neurodiverse people knew all along, is that people who think differently, or their brains think in a different way, they can solve problems in a different way. They can pick up on patterns that others can't see. And that's hugely beneficial for big companies who are trying to make a lot of money or trying to build into new businesses. So they're starting up these centers, like SAP does some amazing work, but not because they feel sorry for a particular group or they want to help them. It is driving their business success hugely. And these people are picking up patterns and challenges that no one else did, or the traditional way of thinking didn't. And that goes across, and that actually is a great example of even other lived experiences. So whether it be gender, race, ethnicity, and so on, again, it's a different experience, which will pick up a different way of thinking, which is what we're trying to say diversity is.
It's fabulous. And we renamed our learning support unit in September. We now is the neurodiversity.
Okay, excellent.
And we have a head of neurodiversity, because I think and what we've said to our parents before is we're all there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just that
100%.
when I was at school, it wasn't recognised.
Well, and it's the same.
Yeah.
It was never recognised, and it was always, I was the disruptive one, or the one who didn't pay attention, or the one.
Yeah.
And it was also my coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Because what was I supposed to say?
Yeah.
I mean, it was embarrassing to try to spell in front of a class and get it wrong every time.
Yeah.
So it was easier to be disruptive and get kicked out.
Yeah.
Than to have to go through that every single day.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who's kicked out here.
Oh yeah.
But if I had been understood, then things might have been different.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So the middle years, so we had 8, 9, 10 together.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of things came up with them?
Yeah, it was really fascinating with the middle years. It was a lot about gaming, of course. They were really interested in gaming characters. We talked about DC Comics, interesting.
Okay.
So Warner Media owns DC Comics, and we were talking about characters.
Yeah.
And we were talking about diversity of characters. So, like Batman being Batwoman, and actually Batwoman being a woman, but also a black woman. And it was so fascinating hearing those stories. And we were also talking about one of the things that we're focusing on is, as we think of superheroes of the future, how do we pick up the different cultures? So what's a superhero in Africa? What's a superhero in Asia? And so on. Because it's not just the American superheroes. There's tales that kids have been told for a long time about superheroes in their countries, their communities, their cultures. And we're now trying to build that into superheroes so that we, in the future, can have superheroes that reflect that global diverse audience. So that was a big thing. And also one of the things we did discuss with the middle group was the key importance of culture being different, that there isn't a dominant culture. And this is something that I challenge myself and my teams a lot, managing a global team, is that the British culture is not the dominant one, neither is the American. We must acknowledge cultural differences. And just because my culture might see things differently doesn't mean that culture's wrong. And it's about how do we respect each other's differences. And that was fascinating, because a lot of them spoke about differences and what that means to them and so on.
And I think it's what's lovely about LVS, our school population is so diverse. With children from all over the world, and I think it enriches our environment, and respecting cultures and accepting that things are different. And
that's one of the things I actually said to them, because when I was at university, I was in a very diverse university with students from around the world. And I said to them that the biggest mistake I made was sticking to people who looked like me, because it was just comfortable, it was easy. And today, 20 years later, I wish I had engaged more with the diverse students, because I managed teams in Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Singapore, Malaysia, South Africa, Middle East, everywhere. If only I'd spent those younger years learning more about different cultures, interacting more, I wouldn't have to learn about cultures, I'd be in a better position. So I said to them, they've got an amazing opportunity with this wealth of diversity of cultures to learn. It will only help them in the future.
Absolutely. And then the little ones, and they're not so little, are they, now at year 6, but did they have a different perspective? Did they ask you questions? What did they say?
Interestingly, they asked the most questions.
Did
they did, yeah. They had a lot. In fact, we had to stop it because they had time had come to an end. It was very interesting. They asked a lot of questions because I worked at Adidas, so it was a lot around Adidas. And I actually asked them a question, which was around how many of them wear Adidas, and I think 90% of them put their hands up. So thank you for supporting Adidas. What was fascinating though was I asked them why do you like Adidas. So some said it fits better. Some said they like the colours. Some said they like the design, and it was fascinating. But what it highlighted, and this is how I try to make sure that they get the differences important, is that they like one thing, but for different reasons. So they have different perspectives for liking the same thing. Which was fascinating. And I spoke to them about footballs and how they're made and so on. And they were just very, very interested. And of course, Harry Potter was a big win with them as well. They absolutely loved it. And gaming. So a lot of them play games, which is, I think it's the future. A lot of kids are playing games. But there are some really good questions about characters and how we create more diverse characters in games, which for that age group I thought was fascinating. It is something that we're working on. Yeah. But for them to acknowledge that, it reinforces the importance of our future consumers or our current consumers wanting to see representation within what they play. And
it came up with the governors as well, that, and we all do it. We encourage our children to be lawyers, doctors, accountants, and, as you say, in certain cultures as well, there will be an expectation. But the gaming industry
is huge.
It's huge, and the rewards are huge, isn't it? It's just getting the right balance and encourage them.
It is, and I think it's that exploring non-traditional careers. I mean, my parents wanted me to either be a doctor, lawyer, or an accountant. Unfortunately, I did neither of those. But the truth is that there's so many careers out there, and we need to broaden our thinking. If I had ever told my dad that I wanted to become a gamer, he would have told me to get a real job. Gaming now pays more than many careers out there. It's one of the biggest growing industries. Especially with the lockdown. But it is exploring things like that, directors of movies. Like, how many people think of careers as a director of a movie? And it's huge money. So I think it is exploring that, and it's making sure that we're not trying to project our own biases or our own stereotypes of what a good job or a good career is. We allow that independent thinking. Because the future of work, and that's probably a whole other topic, but no one knows what the future of work is going to be. No. Everything's changing. No one even knows something like, what's HR going to look like? What's finance going to look like? Technology is taking over and numerous other things. But if we allow individuals the freedom to explore different options, different opportunities, it will just make that future work more richer, better for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting, isn't it?
It is.
I wish I was back in school again. Yeah, saying that there are challenges. And we've got some questions. So would you agree that public organisations, local government, civil service have more challenges with diversity and inclusion than the private sector?
It's interesting. So having worked in both, so I headed up diversity and inclusion for the City of London Police, and I've worked in the private sector as well. It's interesting because I think the challenges are similar on different levels. And it's also not about investment, because many people talk about it's about how much private sector organizations invest in it. Completely false. The biggest achievement in this space is authentic engagement and authentic conversation. It's not the multi-billion pound programs, investments, and so on. It's how do you create environmental cultural change. I do think where the challenge lies within the public sector is it can sometimes, and it's actually now coming into the private sector, seem tokenistic, because of the push of we need more of this, we need more of that. And just to address that, we don't need more, we need more of everything. We need to create equity. We still hire the best people. It's not about tokenism, it never has been. We just know that systems are not equal and equitable to get people there. So hopefully that answers it, but I think the challenges are, in my experience, the challenges were similar, just at different levels.
And there's an interesting one here. It says, it's wonderful that LVS is engaged on this topic and sharing across the community. What actions do you hope will come out of today's discussions? And that's aimed towards me. And I think what it is it's a passion of mine, the fact, when I look at my own upbringing and the challenges that I had, being a woman, in an independent head. I remember walking into a room for a heads meeting when I first became head in 2010. And I walked into it, and I'm sorry if I offend anybody in this, but middle-aged, grey-suited men of a certain age, and I walked in the room and I felt so out of place.
Yeah.
And there was one other head who was the head of a ballet school who kind of went, we became great friends, and we're friends now. And I suppose what it is also that, I more than likely have got some kind of learning need that was never identified and had a really bad time at school. So I think now it is about, we've got different cultures, we've got different needs, the neurodiversity bit, the accepting of who we are, that we're all here to have the best experience that we possibly can.
Definitely.
And I think also when we look at our governing body, and I said to you when we first met, online, and we had a discussion, is that when you look at our school population, it's hugely diverse because of the nature of the school. Look at our governing body, and it's not, and they won't mind me saying that.
Sure.
And that, again, they admitted it, didn't they?
Yeah,
certain
they did,
age group, certain
Exactly.
backgrounds, and maybe a lot of that's to do with the licensed trade charity and the licensed business in itself, but they are embracing it. And they're talking about it, and it's to open it up. And as you say, it's about not putting plasters on. It's about peeling back and having those discussions. And when I left them, because we literally came straight down here, they were buzzing. They were really talking, and So that's, if I want anything from it, is to open those discussions, to make this an even more inclusive place, the happiest place to be. And I keep going back to that word happy, and prepare our young people for that world out there, and to make the best impact.
Definitely, and I think and I'm not just saying this because I'm sitting here, but it is a journey.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen tomorrow. It might not even happen the day after. But as long as that positive intent is there, like even with boards, whether it be governing boards or boards of companies, they're not very, very diverse when you think of all the different elements of diversity. That is an issue, but it requires consistent effort, and it's going to be long-term change. We can't just change it, but it is, how do we start planting the seeds now that will change that in the future? How do we change the culture? How do we be more inclusive? So I think that's the biggest thing. So when we think of what we're going to do, it is those small things. And it's fascinating because when I talk about diversity in our organisation, one of the things I always say is we're not perfect.
No.
We're far from it. But we want to make a difference. And we're going to go on that journey of making a difference.
And I want us to be able to have honest conversations as well. And I think the one thing that hurts me most as a principal of a school is when I find out that there's been a struggle or something's going on that I don't know about. I want to know, because if we know, we can hit things head on. So, Mrs. Gowing, I got a text from Son at lunchtime. He was excited and really motivated by your talk. He mentioned DC, which now makes sense. I didn't know about that until today. Diversity is huge in businesses today. Recruiting with your own bias is so easy to do, but needs to change. I personally want to see more girls enter in science and IT, saying this is the only female sales director in an IT organisation. And I know, Sarah, you're in contact with Carol Robinson, because in Science Week, we're looking at STEAM and women in science, and I know you've put yourself forward for that, so thank you for that. Any more parents out there who can help us, please do. And I think there were some other comments just further up the screen, if we could scroll down a little bit as well.
And I just think, to Sarah's comment, Sarah, thank you. And I just think, again, it's important about that changing the environment of the future. Technology, for example, there's a huge underrepresentation of female talent. But we're having the same discussion. I can remember having these discussions 4 years ago, and we're still doing it because we're not investing in the future. We're not going to schools to speaking to young women, girls, about careers in STEM and what they need to do. And I think a lot of organizations need to invest in that, because I would hate in 2 years, 3 years' time to have the same conversations again and not having done anything. Problem is, everyone wants to fix it for today. They don't care about fixing it for 3 years.
Yeah.
But we need to get organisations to think about that.
You also mentioned with the governors things that were topical. So when it was everyone's invited, or Black Lives Matter, it's about all those different topics and keeping that momentum going, isn't it? And it's an extremely exciting time.
Yeah,
to hit these things head on as well. So great motto, consciously inclusive. I like that one. I think that's great. I like the positive attitude you have around using our everyday mistakes as an opportunity to learn. If people feel safe, they won't be criticised for making a wrong move. They'll be more likely to work towards conscious inclusion.
Definitely. And the truth is that if we're not going to talk about these things, how will we ever move or shift the dial on it?
Yeah.
So we need to create those safe environments, psychological safety, to have difficult conversations. And we just need to, one of the phrases I use quite often is, we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's not easy, but the moment we do that, then it becomes easier.
You've got a few thank yous on there as well. So
Excellent.
great to hear about this. Important to talk to pupils, governors and parents. Just scrolling down now. So I think that we're coming to an end now, but can I just say thank you so much. You've made a real impact on us today.
Oh, thank you.
And if you don't follow Asif on LinkedIn, do, because that's how I watch his posts all the time, and you do some amazing work. And hopefully we can invite you back in maybe next year, and we can tell you great progress that we've made as well.
Definitely look forward to it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody. And if you've got any other questions after the event, and please send them through to me, or any ideas. And don't forget Science Week as well. We need your help. Okay, thank you.